The wind howled through the empty ski resort as I trudged through the snow. The only sound was the crunch of my boots breaking the icy crust. The off-season had always been a quiet time, but this year it was downright eerie. I had taken a job as a caretaker at Frostpeak Lodge, a complex nestled in the Rockies, hoping for some alone time to escape the chaos of my life. Little did I know alone time would be the least of my concerns. My days were quite boring, checking the rooms, making sure the pipes didn't freeze, and occasionally clearing snow from the pathways. The resort was a labyrinth of hallways and empty rooms, each echoing with the memories of past vacations. I felt like an intruder in a ghost town. The isolation was evident, and I eventually began to feel the weight of the empty building pressing down on me. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, I decided to explore the basement. The lodge's owner had warned me that the lower levels were off-limits due to old, unstable structures, but curiosity got the better of me. Armed with a flashlight, I descended the narrow, creaking stairs into the bowels of the lodge. The air grew colder and worse with each step, and the smell of mold tingled my nose. The basement was a maze of storage rooms filled with forgotten furniture and dusty boxes. As I wandered deeper, I found a door slightly open. Pushing it open, I revealed a small room with an old furnace and shelves lined with tools. Among the clutter, something caught my eye: a small, leather-bound book, half buried under a pile of rags. I brushed off the dust and opened the book. It was a journal, the entries written in a hurried, almost panicked hand. The pages detailed the experiences of a previous caretaker, someone who had stayed here decades ago. The entries started ordinary, much like my own days, but quickly devolved into paranoid ramblings. He spoke of hearing voices, seeing shadows move in the corners of his vision, and feeling an oppressive presence watching him. The last entry sent a shiver down my spine. I know they're here. I see them watching me. I can't leave, they won't let me. If anyone finds this, get out while you still can. A loud bang jolted me from my reading. The flashlight beam swung wildly as I spun around, heart pounding. The sound had come from further down the basement. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves, and followed the noise. The darkness seemed to close in around me as I moved. The flashlight started flickering. I turned a corner and froze. There, in the dim light, was a figure. At first, I thought it was a trick of the shadows, but then it moved. A thin man in worn clothes, his eyes wild and sunken, stood staring at me. He muttered something confusing, his hands twitching at his sides. "Who are you?" I managed to wheeze, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't respond, but took a step closer. Instinctively, I backed away, my foot catching on a loose floor plank. I stumbled, and the flashlight slipped from my hand, hitting to the ground and plunging the basement into darkness. I scrambled to retrieve it, my hands shaking. When I managed to get the light back on, the man was gone. I was alone again, but the sense of being watched was overwhelming. I hurried back to the staircase, my breath coming in short, and practically sprinted up the steps. The safety of the lodge's main floor was a welcome relief, but my mind raced with questions. Who was that man? How long had he been living down there, and what had driven him to such a state? That night, I locked myself in my room, the journal gripped tightly in my hands. Sleep was impossible, and every creak of the old building set my nerves on edge. I tried to convince myself it was just an old outsider, a squatter who had taken refuge in the basement, but deep down I knew there was something more wicked at play. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shadows seemed to flicker just out of sight, and strange noises echoed through the empty halls. I kept the journal with me at all times, reading and rereading the entries, searching for answers. The previous caretaker had experienced the same paranoia, the same sense of anxiety. His words mirrored my own fears, and I felt a growing bond with this unknown man who had suffered before me. One night, as I sat by the fireplace, the journal open on my lap, I heard it again, a faint whisper, barely audible over the crackling flames. I strained to hear, but it was gone. Then, a cold draft blew through the room. extinguishing the fire and plunging me into darkness. Panic set in. I fumbled for my flashlight, its weak beam cutting through the pitch black. The whispers returned, louder now, echoing off the walls. They seemed to come from all around me, surrounding me, closing in. I stumbled to my feet, the flashlight shaking in my hand, and back towards the door. A figure appeared in the doorway. I recognized him immediately, the man from the basement. His eyes drilled into mine, and he spoke in a low, raspy voice. "You shouldn't be here. They won't let you leave." Fear gripped me, and I bolted past him, running blindly through the halls. The lodge seemed to twist and shift around me, the familiar corridors becoming an endless maze. I could hear the whispers growing louder, more insistent. They filled my mind, drowning out my thoughts. I found myself at the entrance, the heavy wooden doors standing open, snow blowing in. Without a second thought, I plunged into the storm, the cold biting at my skin. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing in a snowdrift, my breath coming in gasping. The whispers were still there, faint but persistent, urging me to leave, to never come back. I looked back at the lodge, its dark silhouette barely visible through the snow. The windows seemed to stare back at me, like eyes watching my every move. I knew I couldn't stay. Whatever haunted that place had its grip on me, and I wasn't going to wait around to see what it wanted. I forced myself to my feet and stumbled down the mountain, the whispers fading with each step. By the time I reached the nearest town, I was half frozen and incoherent. The locals took me in, warming me by the fire and giving me hot soup. They listened to my story with bleak expressions, nodding knowingly. "You're not the first," one of the older men said. "That place has a dark history. Many have gone up there and never come back. You're lucky to be alive." I nodded, too exhausted to speak. The journal was still clutched in my hand, a reminder of the horrors I had faced. I knew I would never return to Frostpeak Lodge, but the memories would haunt me for the rest of my life. As I lay in bed that night, the warmth of the fire soothing my sore body, I thought of the man in the basement and the whispers that had driven him mad. The lodge had claimed him, and nearly claimed me. I could only hope that whatever haunted that place would remain there, trapped in its icy grip, far away from the warmth and safety of the world below.